Party of the Philippines has developed several courses for educating their revolutionary cadres, as well as their organized masses, and Activist Study is one of those courses. The latest edition, which was revised, I think, after a major rectification movement, and then reprinted in 1999, is split into 4 lessons, and today I'm going to read through Lesson 3, The Mass Line, and comment on it throughout the reading. It's 10 very short pages, follows a pattern of 8 questions and 8 answers, and is an overall excellent introduction to engage if you're looking for a text to study with comrades or learn about the mass line. If you find this episode interesting, I discussed a document by the CPP called Mass Work as a bonus episode on Patreon. In that document and in the episode, we take the line and orientation of the mass line and really begin to interrogate it much deeper and a little more thoroughly. That text starts off with the general principles, but ends up moving into questions of propaganda and education work, stages in the development of a People's Democratic Front, the roles of mass actions and mass campaigns in a protracted people's war, and the relation between consolidation and expansion of mass work. All that to say, if you find this episode or text interesting, check out the bonus episode for my reflection and look up that document to study with comrades. And lastly, to avoid confusion, throughout this episode I'll say to comment when I want to break from the reading and offer my own thoughts, and when I start reading the text again, I'll say back to the text. All right, as I said, the text follows a question then answer pattern, and there are 8 questions, so let's begin. Number 1, why is it that the masses and the masses only are the makers of history is the guiding principle of the mass line? The principle, quote, the masses and the masses only are the makers of history, is a principle born out of scientific means using deep analysis of human history. Comrade Mao said, quote, the masses and the masses alone are the motive force of world history, end quote. To comment, something to be aware of concerning this principle that mirrors the wisdom of Mao here is that it is based on the dialectical materialist world outlook and the historical materialist conception of history. When we say the masses and the masses only are the makers of history, we're not abandoning historical materialism's understanding that a society is defined and largely determined by its class relations, that class struggle is the primary means of creating and transforming societies, or that a society's economic base is dialectically in contradiction with its superstructure. The mass line is not a non-class line. This isn't a vague liberal populism here. Mass work must correspond to the revolutionary class line, else it will fail to serve the people. So I say this up front to clarify that Maoism's principle of the mass line isn't a populist theory or a revision of Marxism away from its revolutionary class line. The mass line assumes an adherence to historical materialism. Back to the text. Many centuries of human history, time and again, have shown that it is the masses that create change in society. It is through their work and production that feeds society. It is through their brains and brawn that brings progress to society in general. It is through their collective strength that prevents any force that wants to undermine the progress of society. These problems in society can be manifested in forms of economic crisis, whose brunt is mostly borne by the toiling masses. If you cannot move the masses, there will be no underlying change in society. This is what is meant when we say the masses are the real heroes. The principle, quote, the masses and the masses only are the makers of history, end quote, is the basic principle of mass line because it explains in a scientific manner why we need to fully trust the masses and why we have to arouse, organize, and mobilize the masses for revolutionary struggle and in advancing our revolutionary tasks. To comment, this principle explains for us why we must trust in and rely upon the masses. They are the ones that create and change history. Many errors in both thinking and practice can come about if this is either not understood or outright rejected. A party of the most experienced, determined, and theoretically advanced revolutionaries cannot make history or transform society. Even after a socialist revolution is won, it is the masses of producing and laboring and working people who have the power to remake the world fundamentally. And it's not that because of an ideal up in heaven that causes us to fetishize the people. It's because of their material and concrete relation to the production of all things that societies need in order to persist. Back to the text. This is the strong and scientific basis in the proper attitude of the masses, of a persistent and resilient struggle of the masses and the party's humble relationship with them. This is the strong and scientific basis of how we can counter or fight the wrong principles of trusting only a small group of people, of being bossy, of bearing all the work, etc. To comment. So again, this is a scientific base and not a moralistic one. But the CPP says that this principle should help us combat wrong principles and wrong practice. And the text particularly noted here the left error of commandism, which we'll say more about later on. So let's go ahead and move on to our next question. Question number 2. What does it mean that we need to trust and rely on the masses? We must firmly grasp within ourselves that the revolution is one endeavor shared by the wide mass of people. If the masses do not actively participate, the victory of the revolution can never be achieved. We need to trust the masses, especially the farmers and workers, to win the people's democratic revolution. It is through the active participation and action of the masses that we can achieve our revolutionary aims and solve the problems that will come along the way. There is therefore a need to go to the masses, unite with them, and effectively lead them. To comment, believing in and depending upon the people is necessary for the victory of the revolution. And I also want to name here that a party who does not trust and rely on the people will be unable to correctly solve certain problems, as well as understand and handle contradictions. Back to the text. It is through persistent and continuous arousing, organizing, and mobilizing of the masses that we can concretize to them the strength of our revolutionary ideas that will become a powerful material that will push the movement of society for the better. And to comment, so it is through mass work that we can demonstrate the strength and correctness of our ideas. Back to the text. Comrade Mao said, "We need, quote, to be good at translating the party's policy into action of the masses, to be good at getting not only the leading cadres, but also the broad masses to understand and master every movement and every struggle we launch." To comment, not only must we have correct thinking that enables us to make concrete analyses of concrete conditions, but Mao correctly says the content of our education and propaganda must be delivered through effective means and in effective ways. We need to develop our capacity to translate our ideas, lines, policies, and general plan for the purposes of developing the consciousness of fellow cadre and the people. Despite all the anti-communist propaganda in the world, communism is not about subduing and governing the masses. Right? That's capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism. What the United States will hold on through its final breath. Communism wants to unleash the consciousness of the masses from the chains of exploitative and oppressive relations and ideologies, and persuade the people to deliberately organize themselves for the socialist struggle to establish a world without classes and without class interests. Question number 3. What does close and warm relationships with the masses mean? The mass line means that we should maintain a close relationship with the masses. First, we need to integrate in our hearts the interest of the masses. We need to make sure that all comrades are tightly connected to the masses and place their interest to the masses above all things. The mass line teaches us that we must love the masses at all times. We must always listen to them and integrate with them instead of putting ourselves above them. To comment, in my understanding of the mass line, this close relationship has 2 dimensions. The first is spatial. The mass line says we have to materially and daily embed ourselves not solely with like-minded revolutionaries, people who primarily agree with us on major questions, but people who haven't studied what we've studied or are even struggling or perhaps aren't even struggling for change. We should befriend the advanced, the middle forces, and even a reactionary or two. We cannot adequately understand the experiences or thoughts of, let alone hope to, move, people we don't really talk with, eat with, live with, perhaps even pray with. And so it's not enough to think we know the conditions and thoughts of the people we're trying to arouse, organize, and mobilize. We need to physically immerse ourselves. And the second dimension of our relationship is what I would call spiritual. Tight connections to people require genuine and personal love. The Mass line assumes a continuous reorientation of our interests, our hearts, our minds, and our spirits toward the material interests of the people. Love isn't something that can be developed overnight. Rather, it must be practiced. Love for the masses should take up space in our heads and time in our daily lives. This is the only way our concern can become genuine and intimate. There's no shortcut to deep love. Back to the text. In integrating with the masses, we are able to arouse them and elevate their level of understanding, help them learn how to organize themselves, and collate all essentials in their present condition and struggle. We need to give notice to the interest of the masses, their basic problems like landlessness, high rents, low wages, etc. All these, and even their particular problems like lack of rice to eat, salt to give flavor to their food, etc. We need to assess these problems and make proper decisions related to these problems. By doing this, we can show to the masses that we embody their interest and our lives are connected to theirs. It is through this understanding that we can help them understand bigger tasks related to the advancement of the revolutionary struggle towards victory. To comment, it is only from the ground of our integration that we can arouse the activity and develop consciousness. A left or commandist error is clear when an organization thinks of itself as revolutionary but has no mass work and is completely disconnected from the people. But again, this section has emphasized that mass work isn't about controlling the minds and bodies of the masses. It's about developing the people to higher and higher levels of conscious participation, understanding, and initiative. Furthermore, this is only possible when we organize based on the particular interests of people in particular conditions and relations, which means we need to investigate and assess their particular problems. Without this knowledge, we will be unable, as the CPP puts it, to make proper decisions related to these problems, which is another way of saying correctly handling the contradictions. And through our demonstration of commitment to a people's particular problems, we can educate them on how their particular issues are connected to the root issues in a given context. Back to the text. Nothing will happen to the struggles of one leading group if it is not closely related and combined in the action of the masses that can only be realized through close relationship with them. On the other hand, if only the masses move without the strong leadership of the party, they cannot sustain that struggle nor steer it in the proper direction or raise it to a higher level of revolutionary struggle. To comment, there are two trajectories that fail the masses. The organization dominated by commandist conceptions and practices that is not rooted in real mass relationships and work, and the organization fallen to tailist conceptions and practices that fetishizes the masses and leaves them to endlessly struggle without revolutionary leadership. Question number 4. What does from the masses to the masses mean? The proper way to lead the masses is, quote, from the masses to the masses, end quote. This means that we need to collate the fragmented ideas and thoughts of the masses and mold it properly. We need to return and explain to the masses the formed idea until they understand and accept it. The mass line agrees with the, quote, from the masses to the masses, end quote, leadership. We depend on the intellect and knowledge of the masses to be able to understand the masses' conditions and problems so that we can generate ideas on how to solve them. Correct planning and decisions can be made if it is part of the experience of the masses. It is therefore our role to go to the masses and immerse ourselves in their midst to be able to gather the different lines of thinking of the masses we want to serve. In analyzing and summing up these ideas, we can concentrate it in one systematic whole that mirrors an objective condition and intellect of the masses. To comment. All right, so to collate is to collect, analyze, and combine or sum up. So we are systematically collecting and summing up the fragmented ideas of the people. And the conceptions of the material situation of the people are fragmented because their continued subjugation depends upon their fragmentation. But equipped with the third and highest stage of revolutionary science, Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, we can then return to the people we're trying to organize with a formulated idea that is in touch with their current conceptions and conditions, but also pushes them toward a higher level of revolutionary consciousness and activity. And what this consolidation and molding of the people's fragmented ideas does is enable us to develop ideological unity among the people for a more correct and more objective understanding of their situation, which is necessary if the movement is to be strengthened. Without ideological unity and organizational strength, the masses will never be able to defeat their exploiters and oppressors. Also, quote, from the masses to the masses, end quote, leadership depends upon the people's knowledge and experience of the conditions and problems. Without such, the party would be unable to generate a correct understanding of the particular conditions and contradictions. Develop a line, which is basically a plan, to solve the people's particular problems, and effectively unify and strengthen masses in struggle for the necessity of revolution. The other option is to misunderstand the problems and mishandle the contradictions. In real life, we can see this in economism or reformism. And the last thought that came to mind here is that the correctness of an idea is determined by the class interests in which it serves. Does it serve the people in their struggle for liberation, or does it serve the imperialists, the colonizers, and the capitalists in reproducing their violence? Back to the text. We need to rely on the capability and strength of the masses if we want to help them solve their basic problems. We trust that however big the problem is, we are sure that we can solve it as long as the masses have unity in collective decisions. It is then our responsibility to let the masses understand that the ideas that are formed are the results of their very own ideas, and they need to embrace them as their own and realize them through collective action. Question number 5. What does it mean that we need to act and move according to the interest and readiness of the masses? The mass line teaches us that we need to struggle according to the objective interest of the masses. This means that we need to move according to their concrete conditions and needs, and not according to what we think. We will get separated from the masses even if our intentions are good, if we deviate from the objective interests of the masses. In general, the tasks and protocols that we put up are correct if it is accorded to what the masses want according to the present time and space. To comment, we've hit on this enough, so it'll suffice to remind the listener that Maoism, or revolutionary communism, is a general theory that must be particularly applied. Back to the text. At first, the masses are not yet aware of their objective needs and do not realize the need for change, or are not yet ready to make a step for that change. If we do not present our ideas in a timely manner, however correct they may be, we will separate ourselves from them. We need to be patient and persistent in the way we explain things to the masses until the time that they are ready to accept these ideas based on concrete conditions, and the masses themselves are ready to work for the change that they want. We need to be guarded against commandism. This means overestimating the actual political awareness of the masses and violating the voluntary movement of the masses. Comrades will only discover the level of preparedness of the masses if they go to the ranks of the masses and conduct an investigation. On the other hand, we also need to be wary of tailism of the masses. This means slow progression of their level of political consciousness and backwardness of their level of struggle for revolutionary change. Some comrades may be following some slow elements. It is wrong to think that their views are the views of the whole broad masses. To comment, in order to act and move in the interest and readiness of the masses, we need to be able to identify, critique, and resist commandism and tailism. So, commandism is when we overestimate the people's level of awareness and consciousness, when we try to develop their consciousness and activity too fast, or when we violate their voluntary movement. Commandism can be seen in our slogans, our strategies, our overall political plan. For example, if at the end of January of 2022, an organization in the US put out an actual call for the masses of colonized and working class people to take up their weapons and overthrow the army and local police forces, we would see just how far ahead and disconnected this idea would be from the present consciousness and activity of the masses. And tailism is the other side of this coin. Work too slowly at developing the consciousness and struggle of the people, generalize the ideas of the more backward masses as opposed to focusing on the ideas and actions of the more advanced, endlessly bowing to the spontaneity of the people while rejecting the necessity of organization, ideological unity, party leadership, and the development of the people's consciousness and activity. These are all signs of groups that tail rather than lead the masses. Back to the text. To be able to destroy commandism and tailism, we need to bring ourselves closer to the basic masses and conduct proper investigation and analysis. How do we do this? We can divide masses into 3 parts: the advanced, the middle, and the backward. The advanced ranks of the masses have a clear understanding of their basic conditions and are ready to struggle to change it. The backward part of the masses, meanwhile, can be easily influenced by backward ways of thinking and may be resistant to struggle for change. The middle part, meanwhile, may understand the need for change but are reluctant and hesitant to move for action. We trust the advanced elements of the mass movement. It is through them that we are able to make the middle force move and can even coax some of the backward forces. This way, we are able to lead the masses according to their objective interest, depending on their readiness to struggle for change. To comment. So, as we discussed in our bonus episode on mass work, which is another document by the CPP, SICA is short for Social Investigation and Class Analysis, and it is the first step to be done when doing mass work. And we never stop doing SICA after a little bit of investigation and analysis, because according to dialectical materialism, what is the only constant in society? Change. And according to Maoism's law of contradiction, aspects of contradictions can be modified quantitatively or transformed qualitatively. All that to say, every communist organization should ground their mass work in actual, concrete, objective, and continuous investigation and analysis, not what we think we know about a people or a place. But we don't just do SICA without aim or direction. By dividing the masses into advanced, middle, and backward, and these apply both to the thoughts and initiative of the people, we focus our organizing and education on the advanced, pull up the middle through the advanced, and may be able to win some backward elements to the cause through such work. Back to the text. If we do not depend on the readiness of the masses, we might pass their basic political consciousness and awareness. We might make them move by ordering them around and not by their free will according to their understanding. At the same time, if we tie ourselves to the greater numbers but backward masses, we will be tailing instead of leading them. It might happen that the advanced and middle masses are ready and are calling to struggle for change, and it ends up that the party is the one that needs convincing. We need to be consistent in elevating the revolutionary consciousness of the masses. This means that we need to be at the forefront in giving revolutionary education so that the masses will continue to elevate their level of readiness to struggle and fight. In relation to this, we are also able to strengthen, solidify, and broaden the organized strength of the masses so that there will be an elevated level of their struggle towards victory. Question number 6. Why is the propagation of the line of the People's Democratic Revolution the key in giving life to the mass line in the current period of the Philippine Revolution? The line of the People's Democratic Revolution has formed from studying the history and conditions of Philippine society. This answers to the interest of the nation for freedom and democracy. The PDR springs from objective conditions and needs of the masses and points toward the path of revolutionary change. And because it follows the objective interest of the masses, The line of the PDR is easily understood by the masses and is easily embraced as their own. The line of the PDR is the key to effectively arouse, organize, and mobilize the millions of exploited masses. In studying the particular conditions, problems, and outlooks of the masses in the area of discipline, we need to guide it according to the line of the PDR. To comment, so the People's Democratic Revolution is the means for the mass of people to be aroused, organized, and mobilized through participation in education. The primary means, I think. The majority of people in the U.S., for example, do not recognize the necessity of ending U.S. settler colonialism. Its colonizing of African and diaspora peoples from Asia and Latin America, living in its borders. Its domination and oppression of the working class. So most people living in this hellhole have yet to realize the need to struggle for socialism and decolonization. But a democratic front in a protracted people's war is the key for developing mass support, mass participation, the revolutionary consciousness of the people, and trust in a revolutionary party. The Democratic Front is one of the three organs of the protracted people's war, and the other two are the party and the People's Army. But the particular organizations that participate in the Democratic Front must come from the particular needs and objective interests of the people in a particular place. This is how we connect our general line to the particular needs of the people. Question number 7. Why is democratic style of work important in living the mass line? Aside from the correct line of the PDR that we employ in our everyday practice, the democratic style of work is important in living the mass line. Experience clearly shows us that the correct style of work strengthens our connection to the masses, while the wrong style of work runs opposite to the wishes and needs of the masses in an established time, which may be a reason for our detachment from the masses. To comment. So just to reiterate this important point here, the style of work of cadre impacts the foundational relationship between the party and the masses, something we can never lose sight of. Back to the text. We need to make decisions after we do proper investigation and consultation with other comrades and masses, and after proper collective decisions. It is not enough that only the leadership understands the decision that was made. We need to convey it to the masses and make them understand so that they can be an active participant in following these decisions. We need to effectively unite as one majority with the comrades and the masses. We need to listen to the masses and accept the correct observations and criticize what is erroneous. We need to avoid working in small groups. We need to cultivate the democratic style of work at all times. To comment. This section is emphasizing yet again the need to combat commandist conceptions and practices. And one of Maoism's theoretical contributions to organizational practices is the practice of criticism and self-criticism. Criticism and self-criticism, which is a practice of ideological class struggle, both within the party and between the party and the masses, is how we can most effectively combat commandist lines and practices, and actually strengthen unity within the party and unity between the party and the people. And to be clear, processes of criticism and self-criticism should be formalized in organizations. I was part of an organization last year where we informally critiqued and informally self-critiqued, but its formalization would have greatly developed our thinking and our practice. So I'd highly encourage folks to study the text Constructive Criticism, a handbook, which can be found at Marxists.org, and formalize the process of criticism and self-criticism within your organization or even your community. Question number 8. Why does the mass line correspond to the revolutionary class line? Who composes the Filipino masses? Who are the masses that need to be aroused, organized, and mobilized? These questions can be answered only if we analyze the classes and understand the revolutionary class line. The revolutionary class line is the principle that teaches us to know the dynamics and relationship of classes in Philippine society. It teaches us who are the friends from the enemies of the revolution and who are the exploited and oppressed classes. It also clarifies the correct class analysis of how we can lead the masses, trusting the advanced ranks of masses, encouraging the middle forces, and separating and fighting the enemies. We also take advantage of the strife among the enemy so that we can further weaken the ruling class and strengthen our own revolutionary forces. Overall, the revolutionary class line teaches us to give importance to the strength of the working class, the peasants, and the semi-proletariat. In the countryside, we give importance to the advanced ranks of farm workers and the poor and lower middle peasants. We also bring into the fold the middle and upper middle peasants and neutralize the rich peasants. We also take advantage of the strife occurring among the enlightened and despotic landlords. Through this, we can effectively separate and weaken the landlord class. It is through the revolutionary class line that there can be a scientific way of recognizing who composes the masses in one particular place. For our final comment, as I said at the top of this episode, the mass line could never be formulated by a liberal populist organization or a revisionist, Marxist-only-in-name organization that rejects historical materialism or the historical development of the revolutionary science. The mass line is firmly rooted in historical materialism, scientific socialism, and Maoism's law of contradiction. Revolutionaries cannot hope to correctly guide the struggle and develop the people's consciousness with wrong ideology and wrong analysis of the particular conditions and contradictions. The revolutionary class line is how we can know who our true friends and enemies are. It tells us what people objectively have revolutionary potential, what classes and groups need allied with, the composition of each class, and such. The revolutionary class line enables us to know how to strengthen our forces, while simultaneously identifying the ideas of the enemy in our own ranks and weakening enemy forces through strategic struggle based on scientific assessment. In the U.S. In particular, we don't like the idea of there needing to be ideological unity produced by ideological struggle. We have this affinity for broad left unity and big tent unity that opportunistically avoids ideological struggle, calling any claims of revolutionary science factionalist and dogmatist. But while we do need to endlessly combat dogmatism, abandon the development of revolutionary science, reject the revolutionary class line, and we will endlessly fail to make revolution with the people. And that's it for this episode. If you want to study another text, I really recommend you check out the episode on mass work at patreon.com. And since I mentioned it, I'll also link in Constructive Criticism, a handbook, in the show notes. All right, friends, all the love and solidarity to you, and we will talk soon.